All right, Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. You have a good week?
I did. How about you?
I'm not in law enforcement. I had a great week.
Yeah, you know what? That's easy to say, right? Still at home in your pajamas, right? While we're out here getting it in.
This is the only time I get out of my house. So thank you for doing this show with me because it gets me out. I came to work several days this week. So
Okay. So what do you think
I'm wearing a mask. I'm trying to.
I see that. You always protecting yourself.
Well, no, this protects other people.
Well, that's true. But you know what? You get protection that most people don't get. But go ahead.
Only when you're around.
Yeah.
The sheriff protects me.
Yeah. So what do you think about what's happening this week? You've been keeping up with it?
I have been watching it like a hawk.
What you think?
I have mixed emotions like I do every other week of my life. I see some insanities, and then I see some movements in good directions. And so somewhere in the middle of that, hopefully, calmer heads will prevail. I mean, what do you think about Chaz, the zone there in Seattle taken over by the protesters and all that? What's it called? Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
You know what? I hadn't been keeping up with that. What I've been following pretty much is just seeing how the atmosphere is changing across this country. So many things are happening. You know, what was really amazing to me, I said, well, maybe things are really starting to shift. Well, the NASCAR came out and said they're removing the Confederate flag. You know, whether you for it or against it, that was a pretty bold step. You know, all these steps that are being taken now, it makes you say, wow, maybe there's something happening. Even though the president came out and, some of the people were talking about changing the names of some of the military bases. That was an interesting conversation. You know, black and white people are protesting together in numbers like they've never done before. That's really interesting. The movements that I'm seeing people doing, bands changing their names. I mean, there's so many things happening. Whether you like it or not, there's a change happening in America.
Yeah, I think that's unarguable. And, we often want to talk about how we get to someplace, but probably the more important thing to talk about is where we need to go and how to get there. So there's been a lot of attention given to this autonomous zone, which is, my family's asked me about it several times. We can sit around at night and talk. And the fact that basically a group of protesters have taken over like an 8-city block area of downtown Seattle. They have named it the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. They have kicked out all the police. They actually took over a police precinct, and they basically have something that looks like an independent country running there right now. Maybe that's an anomaly, and we shouldn't really focus on it because of all the other things you're talking about. But sometimes it's kind of hard to ignore something that blatant. It's they burned down a police precinct in Minneapolis, and now they've taken over one and chased out the police, and it's a police-free zone there now.
So how do you feel about that? These police-free zones that you're talking about, this defunding, disbanding of law enforcement. What's your take on that?
So if I were in charge of things, I would be having especially if I was in charge of, say, Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
I would want everything that you just said a minute ago. Those are changes that should have happened forever ago. We shouldn't need to have something like this to prompt us to do things like that. But the other thing I'd be pushing for would be a big movement called Fund the Police. Because to me, the answer is if we send more money to Bobby Kimbrough and he uses it for training and improving the sheriff's office of Forsyth County, that makes all communities, and especially the poorer communities and any community of color, safer and better, and a better place to produce better results, people growing up in a safer place, people with better education. So to me, the whole movement of defund the police and pull the police out, have police-free zones, I will tell you this much, that will be a temporary experiment. In fact, it's interesting, even in the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zones, they've created their own police. They have armed people at the borders.
Really?
Yeah, and they're evidently they're doing some heavy-handed shakedowns of local businesses, give us money to protect you. And so they've basically created their own sort of law enforcement, but without laws. It's just the rule of the mob. Now, again, it's just a few blocks of downtown Seattle. It's not the whole country. But as I watch it, it makes me think about how some revolutions have started in the world.
That's true.
And the demands of a huge group of people change. And you and I have talked a few times about my fears, which would be that the movement gets hijacked. So instead of just dealing with systemic racism and fixing those problems, there's the funding seems to be going more toward the socialism push and the defund the police push, and let's attack all people of any kind of privilege push. You and I joke about privilege a few times, and you know, one of the things I wish all of our listeners and everybody in the country would realize is that there is a big difference between black and white when it comes to privilege. I mean, I actually grew up poorer than you. I grew up in a little farm. We had nothing. My parents' home burned to the ground. Then they had even less. They had nothing. And so, you know, then I became a missionary with the lowest paid occupation in the job in the world. But if you're poor white or if you're disadvantaged white, you never, ever have to wake up a day with your skin color being an additional problem.
That's true. That's true.
You don't have to ever wake up that way.
You know, I've been looking around, looking at the news feeds and just imagining, you know, what is really going on. You know, there's so many people that's focusing their energy on law enforcement. And I take the words of one of the celebrities, I can't think of his name, it escapes me right now. He said that if you hate the police now, wait till they decide they don't want to do it anymore.
Whew.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's so many things in our country that are far greater issue than that. There's so many things that racism systemic that have caused us to come to this point. And I get it that there's so many things that we need to fix in law enforcement. I'm for retooling, reconstruction, redoing a lot of things. But when you get right down to it, you're talking about disbanding, defunding. That escapes me. I don't even know how you can do that and expect to maintain a capitalistic, free society. I don't know how you could do that without law and order. And so, you know, I've been looking at a lot of things, you know, over the last week and just trying to say, what is it going to take for us to realize that we've got to figure this out together? You can't focus all your energy and say, you know what, we hate the police. Because the men and women that serve in law enforcement are men and women. They're ordinary people doing extraordinary things sometimes, you know, and one or two, the percentage that violate people or do things, we have galvanized a whole profession based on individuals.
Yeah, and you know, if you're out there listening to us, you're in some profession, you're in some career.
Exactly.
And no matter what career you're in, there are some bad apples in it.
Somewhere.
But we shouldn't denigrate the police any more than we would denigrate their careers or their fields, because everybody's got. You know, I'm an ordained minister. There's some really bad apples among the clergy. There have been some pedophiles, some nasty pedophiles, and unfortunately, along the way, there was some protection of those pedophiles amongst people in the higher positions. But you can't throw all clergy into that basket and tar them all with that same brush like we are doing with the police right now. Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, we need to deal with the problems of systemic racism and keep targeting that and find cures and fixes and remedies. But on the other hand, this isn't one of the cures. This actually makes it worse, not better.
It does. Anytime you start to separate and divide people, you're actually not finding a cure for the problem. You're isolating it, and the problem will start to metastasize. It'll grow bigger and bigger and bigger because everybody has to have a seat at the table. Regardless of what you think, I have an opinion. And sometimes your opinion, you know, is not always right. It's like hearts. Everybody got a heart, good, bad. Some are old, some are fading, some are just done. But we've got to realize that we're in this together, and we've got to have a real conversation. Some conversation that we're not having is that how do we get here? You know, it's nothing wrong with realize. Once you realize you have a problem, the problem becomes when you don't try to fix the problem. Say, okay, I don't have a problem. When we actually do. We have problems in this country that keep us from being greater than we are. We have problems in this country that keep us divided. You know, I get letters all the time talking about, well, you know, the people laying in the street, we should run over them. You know, they're whining. Why are they whining about something, thinking that America still owes them something? There are so many things that are affecting us from days going by. You know, I heard a lady say the other day is that you're penalizing people. Nobody living today basically owned any slaves. And I listened to what she said, and I took that and I said, but I don't think she get it. You know, we talk about, what is it, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? People go into traumatic situations, right, and how it haunts them years later. Mm-hmm. And so I've actually been doing some research on that for the last couple of weeks, right? And if you listen to what it means and how it affects the brain, right, America could actually be experiencing post-traumatic post-traumatic slavery disorder. Not only as a slave, but as what happened before you even got here. So for an example, that same scenario where she said that she didn't own any slaves or she wasn't a part of any type of racism. But guess what? That mentality is passed on from generation to generation.
And you know what? She wakes up every morning of her life without
as
the
a beneficiary
disadvantage of black skin.
Right.
She does. She's never. She can say whatever she wants to about the past.
Right. She's a beneficiary of that.
That's right.
She's a beneficiary of that. So my grandmother, 97, God rest her soul, died 2 weeks ago. We buried her 2 weeks ago. And we've been having this conversation as we mourn and go through that.
What did she see in 97?
And she shared with me some of the things that she saw in her life about a year ago. Her and I were talking, and I was just videoing her, and she was talking about the things in life that she saw. And I listened to some of the things that she saw, and even at 95, 2 years ago, she carried some of that with her, how it has shaped her. And what she saw, she has passed that down to her children, right, which shaped them. And then their children, which my father, has shared some things with me. So we all are shaped by our past. We all are shaped by events of this country. That's why we call it history, his story. Your story brought you to this point. You talked about growing up poor. That has shaped you and affected you. It has brought you to who Charles Pettit is. And so we have to acknowledge certain things that have happened. Nobody's saying we're going to put blame on it. Nobody's saying we hold it, but you have to.
And we don't want to, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right. That's all right.
We don't, so you said a minute ago, and in fact, everything you said seems powerful to me. And you said that we have holes. We have things that need to be improved and fixed. But one of the things we have that I think gives us as a group of peoples that is a giant blessing is our system that was set up in this country of government, where we have these checks and balances. We have a constitutional republic instead of a pure democracy. Praise God we don't have a pure democracy where everybody just gets to vote on everything, because in those settings, it's the minorities that always lose. And so Brown versus the Board of Education, that moved us away from segregated schools. Well, if you just had every black person and every white person in the country just get an equal vote, that would have never happened. But that actually went to the Supreme Court of the United States, and so the Supreme Court of the United States was a voice for the minority. And our system was set up, executive, legislative, judicial branches. One group makes the laws, the other group enforces them, the other group interprets them and makes sure that they're constitutional. The Supreme Court finally, and I forget the case, did away with all the remaining crazy laws in the country that banned interracial marriage.
That's true.
I'm not sure if you'd just had an open vote amongst all people, if that would have gone through. I doubt it. But thankfully, we have a system of government that protects the minority population, whether it's a minority racial group or even if you're a minority state. If you're Wyoming and you only have like 12 people in your whole state, sorry, Wyoming, I'm not trying to insult you, but you get 2 senators.
Right.
And so it allows us to have a voice for all people, including those that would normally be disenfranchised in other kinds of systems. So I'm a little concerned. There seems to be a movement like, let's overthrow the system, let's overthrow capitalism, let's overthrow law enforcement, let's overthrow it all. And, these were the kinds of voices, Lenin had that kind of a voice. And what he did is he was able to stir up the emotions of the oppressed groups to get his purposes accomplished.
True.
The minute his purposes were accomplished, those became the far worse oppressed than ever before. Mao did that. We want to say, let's go to a socialistic system or a communistic system because they love the oppressed. Well, they do up until the minute they get absolute power. Exactly. But go to China today and take a look at the minority groups and see what you see. You'll see the worst oppression on the planet. And so we should be very, very thankful for the system that we have, fix the holes that are in it, deal with the issues you and I talk about every week, and some of the things thankfully coming out of this. I'm not very much a fan of illegal protest. And I heard that here in town, Interstate 40 was closed down this week because protesters.
It was. I saw that. But you know what? Like you said, the system is forever evolving. The system that we have in the documents or the docs allow so many evolutions to take place, how this country has evolved. And so people have a right to protest. I have no problem with the peaceful protest.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead. I got an answer.
Do you have a problem with peaceful, illegal protests?
So you're saying people just showing up, jumping on the highways and inconveniencing others?
I'll tell you what I'm actually thinking, because I had a conversation. I have my family is pro-life. Okay, we're pro-life. And I have a daughter who's strongly pro-life. She actually goes to Washington, D.C. every year and marches in a pro-life protest. It's a protest that has a permit. They're told where they can stand and walk, and they do that. They do it every year.
Right.
She's angry against abortion. She's actually very angry against late-term abortion, where they stick a needle in a baby's head and kill it with a poison. That's a baby that will be viable outside of the womb. She hates that. She hates it with all of her heart. But she says, Dad, we go every year and we march peacefully and legally. She's asking me, would we do better if we just started taking over towns and burning things down and screaming a lot more? Would that get us, because maybe those tactics work better? And so you're in law enforcement. So I was thinking about this in preparation for our conference. You basically swore an oath to uphold the laws, to enforce them. But when protests become illegal, what do you think then?
So you know that Martin said that protest is the is the voice of the unheard, right?
Yep.
And then what you see when you see what you call illegal protests, that's when people feel that the system no longer respects them as legal individuals, that the system has gone awry and that they have no faith in the legal system. And so I understand the behavior of what's happening, but that don't make it right.
So I get she said the same thing. If there's any unheard voice, it's the 13,000 late-term babies that are killed with a needle in their brain every year.
Right.
Both of my daughters were born premature, one 5 weeks, the other one a couple of weeks. 35 days my oldest daughter was alive, during which time if she had been on the other side of the birth canal, they could have stuck a needle in her brain and killed her. You get her on the other side of that birth canal, you try to stick a needle in her brain and kill her, that's capital murder. Bobby Kimbrough is going to throw you in prison and you're going to get the needle yourself. And so that's an unheard voice. No one's hearing their voices. They're inside the womb. They can't even make a noise. And so she's saying, should we be that voice? Should we make those same kinds of noises and get that same kind of attention? The majority of Americans are opposed to abortion. A vast majority are opposed to late-term abortion, but we just peacefully march in Washington every year. It's a huge crowd. It's the biggest protest in Washington every year, but nobody listens to it because it doesn't match the narrative of the extreme left that's pro-abortion, and since it doesn't match their narratives, it doesn't make any airtime. If you want airtime, you got to destroy things or march illegally.
I don't look at it like that, Doc. I don't think you got to destroy stuff to get airtime, and I don't think that you got to make a lot of noise. I think that what's happening and why they're getting the airtime is that black people have been oppressed for quite some time. Black people have been 200-300 years of oppression since they arrived here. And so even in my lifetime at 58 years old, I've seen oppression. I've seen racism. It just wasn't too long ago that they integrated the schools. I mean, so there's so many things that we can point.
And when are they going to integrate the churches? That's what I want.
Well, you know what? That'd be your job, right?
I'm trying.
But my question always is that if you look at this thing, right, remove race from it. Let's give it names. Let's say we got the Pettit family, right, in lane 1. And we got the Johnson family in lane 2. And let's say y'all going to race from here to New York, right, by land, driving. And let's say I give the Johnson family a 7-hour head start on the way to New York. And then the Pettit family leaves 7 hours behind them, right?
Do I get my Z4 in this story?
You get anything you want. You can either put a Ferrari in it, right? You're still not going to get to New York before the family
That's true.
That left 7 hours in front of you, right? And so if you equate that to life, and we talk about 100-year head start, 200, 300, 400-year head start that the Johnson family got. Let's flip it. And the Pettit family, for 100, 200, 300, 400 years, we held you in some type of space that enabled you from getting where you were going, enabled you from having the freedoms and the prosperity, enabled you from pursuing life and happiness, right? You would be feeling that effect. Your family would be feeling that effect years later. There's no way that you can justify it and say, well, that didn't matter. You cannot say that. When you say that, when somebody says that to me, well, that didn't matter, that whole conversation went out the window to me. Because from that head start, you gain stability, whether it was economic stability, whether it was social stability, whether it was you being able to set the laws in place. You know, there's so many things that even today you benefit from that part of the history that you were allowed to move totally free than your counterparts. And you have to acknowledge that.
I wouldn't. The only thing I would disagree with you on in that you just said is that the methods didn't get any press. I think the methods got a lot of press. But on everything else you just said, I would agree 100%. And I think it's worse than a lot of people would want to admit. You're talking about the Head Start. The studies are very, very clear that if a person is applying for a job and you have the HR person or the boss or the owner who's hiring, that you're twice as likely to get the interview if you have a white-sounding last name than a black-sounding last name. It doesn't matter about your qualifications, your credentials, your skill, or your ability. You're just at the disadvantage. I'm halfway ahead of you to New York, to use your analogy. And then we talked a little bit about the HUD policies that existed up until just a few years ago, which were very, very prejudicial against the black people. And so it was predatory lending in one part of town, favorable lending in the other side of town. So when we talk about jobs, you talk about education, you talk about real estate, and it's seen just in the way people treat those who might want to move into their community, and who we're going to sell to. And my wife, I think I've said this 3 or 4 times on here before, but my wife does a little bit of real estate where she buys and maybe tries to flip a home or buys and rents one. And we've had white neighbors sometimes come over and ask about, what kind of a person are you going to allow to move into this rental house that you're setting up?
That's code for black or white, right?
That's exactly. And like one of them said something like, well, we got one of those folks living up here about 2 blocks from here, and that person hasn't really caused a lot of problem. But we don't want anybody down here with us. So they're not really saying it, but they're saying it.
That's code for that person up there, right?
It's pure racism, and that's not an isolated
here's my question.
incident.
So when you see that and you hear that, what do you do?
That's the right question, I think. And in that
Give me the
particular
right
case,
answer. Give me the right
I wasn't
answer.
there and didn't hear it. I heard it from my wife telling me.
What did she
about the
say? What did she
conversation.
say?
She came home and told me because she was indignant. But as far as going and doing something about it, you tell me what I should do about it.
Well, see, what happens is that when somebody says something that you know is wrong, you should not allow that to go unchecked. Yeah. You should not. Because what happens is your silence is co-signing it, right? And so I think that so many times in life, we see things, well, I don't want to get involved. I want to sit on the sidelines. Well, I know that's wrong, but I'm going to stay in my little comfortable corner, and I'm not going to participate in that. And that's where we go so wrong every time. That person should have been checked. They should have been made aware of how simple you sound saying that, how ignorant that is.
And, a lot of times it's extremely subtle. So the person doesn't really come out and say what they actually feel or believe. It's subtle. It's code. And so if you challenge it, they'll quickly deny that's what they really meant.
But I get confused sometimes. People say that they're Christians. I believe this, I believe that. They confess with their heart and their mouth that they're this and they're that. But yet the scriptures say, what you've done to the least,
amen,
you've done unto me, right? And so when you treat people a certain way and you allow that to go unchecked, there has to be a bell or something that goes off your head and say, hypocrite, hypocrite, you're really not practicing what you preach, right? So I see people every day in this community, around this world, that if they come out and make statements, they could be a game changer. So for an example, let's bring it home. Let's say Dr. Pettit, right, who was the president of a very prestigious university, Piedmont University of North Carolina. Let's say he comes out, right, and he says, you know what, I'm going to call my friend Elrod over at another university, HBC, right, Winston State. And I'm going to call my friend up at Wake Forest University, Dr. Hatchett. And I'm going to call my friend down here at Salem. I'm going to call my friend over at Forsyth Tech. And together, we're going to come out and we're going to make a statement on how we feel about racism and what we won't stand for in our universities.
So, I feel a little defensive over here because
did I step on your toes?
No, but you don't know why I feel defensive.
Share it with me.
All right, so here's why. I get a feeling that all of us are supposed to be suddenly awake because of what just happened, the horrible killing of George Floyd.
We should have been awake. We late. We actually late.
Well,
but go ahead. We overslept.
I feel offended when people act like that maybe I'm just waking up, because the truth is I have been screaming Black Lives Matter in 1,000 real ways. I'm not talking about by burning down some building downtown. I'm talking about by taking real action all of my adult life. I have challenged the status quo. I've done it right here. We've become the most racially diverse university in this state, maybe this country.
But you got to keep going. See, when people say, I'm awake, I've been awake, right?
Well, I'm saying I've been taking action.
Okay, well, you can't stop.
I don't have any intention to.
This is a marathon. You're going to be, this will never
By the way, I'm going to interrupt you because.
Why are you interrupting me?
Because time is running out, and I'm going to say something you're going to like.
I stepped on your toes. Go ahead.
I'm going to say something you like. So, church, Christianity.
Yeah.
So, there's been a lot of injustice done under the flag of Jesus Christ throughout human history. Obviously, we call it a hospital for sinners. Well, we've been really good sinners from time to time. But I experienced racism very firsthand during my early ministry days, even when I was in seminary. I experienced it when I became a staffer at a little church in Georgia. I'm not going to call their name right now.
You told me that.
But did I tell you what happened? Did I tell you I invited a black lady to church and what the chairman of the board did?
You told me that. But you know what people want to know now? What have you done for me lately? What are you going to do right now in this moment, this defining moment in our history? What is Dr. Pettit going to do?
I like that
question. What is Dr. Charles Pettit going to do?
So,
is he going to say, well, I've been awake. I admitted a few African American students into my school. Is he going to do something profound
now?
I
didn't admit a few African American students.
Well, are you going to do something defining right now?
So we are doing something defining.
I'm listening.
And we started doing it years ago. We didn't need this catalyst moment to make us start doing something. That's what the offensive part is.
But are you going to see, like, for example, if I drop this bottle of water behind the table, right, you can't really see it. But if I slowly edge it up, you start to see the cap of it, right? So the target ain't that big, right? So you doing just enough to be seen. Are you going to step up to where I can actually see you and you actually making a difference?
So my answer is we started stepping up years ago, and we didn't need this moment to make us step up. So in 2013, we launched the President's. What are we doing now? We launched the President's.
Now that I'm an alumni of this university, what are we doing now? I want to know, what is my alumni doing?
So
before I start writing checks.
So we were doing the thing I think that should have been done 13, 14 years ago, which is when we started doing it, which is we started the President's Diversity Scholarship, which basically said that if you are in any racial or ethnic minority, you're guaranteed to get this certain scholarship, which is why our school is now the most racially diverse university in North Carolina. We are 20% black. The nation is 13% black. So we actually have a higher demographic than the nation does. And so we took steps years ago, and we're going to remind everybody in the world that we have been doing this. So if we got 100
students, we got 20 of them that are people of color?
That is correct. We have 1,000 students, and 200 of them are people of color.
Wow.
So we are actually, and you take a look at our city, we have Winston-Salem State that's almost entirely black.
That's like giving
and Wake that's almost entirely white. But we at Piedmont match the demographics.
That's like giving a hippopotamus a Tic Tac, right? 20%, right?
Wait, say that again?
That's like giving a hippopotamus a Tic Tac.
All right, we're out of time, so you have to explain that one fast.
I promise you. In other words, you really ain't done nothing. If a hippopotamus got bad breath, a little Tic Tac for a hippopotamus ain't done nothing. In other words, if you only got 20% in your school of 100%, that's great, but we can do more.
So you think that being better than the demographic is not good enough?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the bar is so low. We did it. That's low. That's low hanging fruit.
So we usually conclude these on a positive note, and we're out of time. So give me something positive.
You can't. What we can do is positive. I need everybody, all hands on deck, Doc. I need for you to get with Hatch. I need for all of you us to do something. Get out, do something. If you can't walk, crawl, run, say something, do something. You can't just go your silence. I can't just do, I'm doing this. Well, that's not enough because you're not doing enough. You have the ability to change atmospheres.
All right, you're heard.
Thank you.
You're heard.